Gonna do a little food prep with a whole chicken today. I'm going to gently poach this whole chicken and get 2 meals out of it. I'm gonna do a chicken pot pie, and then I'm gonna do a chicken salad. So to get that started, we're just gonna put some vegetables in a pot and, like I said, lightly poach this whole chicken and hopefully get 2 meals out of it. So I've got my chicken in my pot, and I put just enough cold water in there for it to cover the chicken. And now I'm gonna add, I got my veggies over here. I've got 1 onion, I've got 2 bay leaves, I've got 6 garlic cloves, a stalk and a half of celery with the leaves, and a couple carrots. I'm gonna put all of that in, and then I'm gonna add a tablespoon of salt and a teaspoon of dried thyme. And then we're just going to let that poach on a low simmer for about 30 to 45 minutes, just till the chicken is done. Once the chicken is done, I'm going to remove the chicken and debone it, and then I'm going to put those bones back in that broth to make a deep bone broth for our pot pie. So in goes all our veggies. Everybody in the hot tub. Garlic, onions, bay leaves, carrots, celery, and I'm going to sprinkle 1 tablespoon of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of dried thyme, then I'm going to give that a stir, and like I said, I'm going to bring that up to a low simmer, and I'm going to let it go for about 30 to 45 minutes. So this is what we want, just that ever so slightly little simmer. We don't want to boil the chicken, we just want to let it simmer there because we want it to be nice and juicy and tender. So we're just going to let it simmer at that little bit of bubble there. So I believe the chicken is now done, so I'm going to take it out of the broth, and I'm going to debone it and put the bones back in there to continue to make a deep broth. So now we've got our chicken deboned. We've got our chicken carcass. We're going to go back into our broth with that and let that go for about an hour so that we have a good bone broth for our other dishes. That chicken was about a little over 5.5 pounds, and it looks like the yield was a little about 2 1/4. So almost half of what the chicken original weight was is what the yield of the chicken was. Now we'll strain all the bones out of the broth, and we've got a good bone broth for any chicken recipes that you might need. You can even put it in the freezer and keep it till you need it. But I think I'm going to make a pot pie. So I'm going to make a pie crust for my chicken pot pie. I've got 2 cups of all-purpose flour here. And I'm just going to put a sprinkle of salt. I'm just going to sprinkle some salt over the top of there before I start grating my butter in. And I'm actually going to grate the butter in there. That just will help me work it a little better. It's already being broke down for me, so I don't have to work as hard to get it where I need it. So you see there, I've got the butter, and I'm just going to start working that butter into the flour. Now I started with very cold butter, and I actually store my flour in the freezer, so both are very cold. And when I get this butter to where I think it needs to be, I'm actually going to add the liquid. We're now going to sprinkle in some buttermilk rather than water. I'm using buttermilk, ice cold buttermilk. And I've got about 6 tablespoons here. We'll see if we need all of it depending on the flour, but I'm just going to start mixing that in. And we're just going to squeeze it all together so that the dough, you definitely want to take your rings off for this. Just bringing that dough together. That butter should just start combining with that little bit of liquid to form our pie dough. So I've been bringing this together for about 5 minutes now, and as you can see, I've got it in a round disc, and this is actually going to make 2 crusts, but I'm going to put it in the refrigerator like this and let it rest while I'm building the rest of the pie, and then we'll take it out and we'll roll it out and put it in our pot pie. I've got 3 tablespoons of butter melting in the skillet. To that, I'm going to add my vegetables, which are a half of an onion and about 2 stalks of celery. And I'm going to put a pinch of thyme in there as well. And I'm going to get those going, and then when they're translucent, we'll add our flour. We're going to go in with those vegetables. We're going to let them go, like I said, for a few minutes, just to get till they're translucent, not really any color. I'm going to put a pinch of thyme. I'm going to add a good pinch of salt to those vegetables. And we're going to let them go just a few more minutes. So those vegetables are nice and soft, so we're going to add about 3 tablespoons of flour. And that's going to help us make our sauce for our chicken pot pie. We don't want a lot of color on this roux. We really just kind of want to cook the raw flour taste out of it, so we're just going to cook it for a few minutes before we add our liquid. So you remember that beautiful broth we made, and we got 2 cups of bone broth, and I'm going to add that to the pan. I'm just going to let that start to thicken. So you can see that's starting to thicken. We're just going to let it cook there for a little bit. While that's doing that, I'm going to roll out my pie crust, and we'll add the rest of the ingredients, get it bubbly hot, and then into the oven we'll go. To that, I'm going to add a half a cup of half and half. That's going to give us the creamy. Look at there. Now all that chicken pie goodness is coming together. I'm going to add my chicken. And that's about a quart. That's roughly, you see there's good chunks of chicken in there. And that's half of that chicken. If you go watch our video on breaking a chicken down for food prep, that's half of that chicken. Go like and subscribe to see how to food prep to make these meals later on. Now I'm going to add 2 cups of frozen vegetables. And when I add those vegetables, I'm going to add just a little bit of salt because those vegetables are not seasoned. So we season as we go. So I'm going to add some salt to those vegetables. I'm going to let this cook, come to a boil, and then I'm going to taste it for seasoning, and then into the oven we go. So I've tasted my seasoning and it's spot on, so I'm not going to add anything else at this point. It's getting nice and bubbly. So you see, I've got my pie crust here. So in the pie crust I'm going to go, and then to the oven I'm going to go. So I'm going to go on top of that. Look at that. I'm going to go on top of that with my top crust. And I'm going to seal it. Then I'm going to cut 2 slits here and then in the oven. I'm not good at the pretty, so I just combine those 2 crusts in there. I did cut a slit here to allow that steam to come through. Now I've got my oven at 425 degrees and it's preheated. I'm going all the way on the bottom rack for about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to drop that temperature to about 400 and finish cooking it from there. That initial high temperature is to get that bottom crust good and crunchy. So just out of the oven, piping hot, and I guess the question would be, was it worth the trouble of making that bone broth, making the sauce homemade from scratch, no canned cream of mushroom soup in this? This is all homemade from scratch. I guess there's only one way to find out. Let's cut it and take a bite.